Ever feel like your podcast is just out there with no idea if it's actually building your business?
Ruthlessly cut out anything that doesn't actually help you achieve that goal. You're going to hate your first episode anyway. Like, there's no escaping that. You just have to kind of embrace the fact your first couple are going to kind of suck. That's the only way out is through.
On Scale Smart, Grow Fast, we talk a lot about growth. The thing is, growth stalls when your content has no strategy behind it. It's something we see all the time at Workogenics too, where we have ultimate executive assistants help leaders create the consistent execution that real business development requires. Today's guest has spent years on this issue. Megan Dougherty co-founded One Stone Creative, where she's helped hundreds of business owners turn podcasting into a genuine bottom line strategy instead of another content creation channel. She even wrote the book on it, literally, Podcasting for Business, which I have started and can't wait to finish. There's so many gems in there to apply. So, Megan, thank you for joining me today. I am really excited to spend some time with you.
Adrienne, likewise. It's a real pleasure to be here, and I'm so excited to talk about this with you.
So let's start at the beginning so people understand your origin story. When did you come into realizing that podcasting could really help businesses grow?
Well, it's kind of interesting. I sort of fell backwards into podcasting. I didn't set out to say, I'm going to become a podcast producer and strategist. My background is in digital business development and online audience building, that kind of thing. And I had left the company where I started my career. I was kind of at loose ends doing different freelance projects, and a colleague reached out and she said, hey, do you want to start a business together? And I said, well, with you, Audra Casino, I would love to. Her background was in broadcast audio. So we put those two skills together, the broadcast audio and video experience that she had and the kind of business development and strategic background that I had. And we started producing podcasts for businesses back in 2017. And we've been doing it ever since. We kind of really found that there was a gap in the marketplace. There's lots of people who can teach you how to podcast and do a very good job at it. But podcasting when you're a business owner is a different beast because it's really not all about the podcast. It's about what the podcast does for your business. And I found in that gap, there's so much to do and explore and so many different ways to use them. It's endlessly fascinating. So I'm still learning and enjoying teaching at the same time.
I feel what you're saying because I have seen so many business owners get into podcasting and it's really exciting at first. But the truth is it takes a lot of time for a business owner. Like I know I have to commit. I have time in my schedule, like people have to schedule. And if you're putting out an episode a week, you're filming an episode a week. You're showing up for that. You've got your team. If you're not doing it yourself, you have your team. So you have business assets that are dedicated and spending, effectively time and money on preparing for that podcast, on editing it, post-production, on all of this. So it is a big commitment. And I think that related to that, as business owners, whatever we're going to spend our time, money, and energy on, it has to help the business grow, right? In some way, it's got to somehow connect to bringing in money in some way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think the common thing is most of the podcasts that are out there are started either as passion projects because people love them, or they're started to be businesses in and of themselves, and they're going to people who start them to build a business and hopefully monetize through sponsorship or other thing. That's how they're approaching podcasting. And that's what most of the advice out there about podcasting is. And it's good advice for those goals. But if you run, an accounting practice, or if you're a coach or a consultant, you already have a business. You don't need another one in the form of your podcast. It's got to be working for you. And the podcast is just a tool to achieve different outcomes. Are exactly correct. It's not the cheapest, fastest, easiest tool you can use. It can be a very effective one, but it's not the simplest. And it's not the, least time intensive by any means. So you really have to make sure that the time and the money and the energy that you're investing in it is paying off in a way that you can point to and measure.
Right. I love that. Now, let's say you see these business owners, they're trying to use a podcast for business. Let's start with one of the big mistakes. One of the most common things you see business owners making in this area?
So one of the really big mistakes, and that kind of expresses itself in many different ways, is a mismatch between the goal that you have as a business owner and the format and structure of the podcast. So podcasts can do a lot of different things within a business, but a show that does, say, help you build your network really, really well is going to be different than a show that converts listeners into buyers. They're just different shows that are trying to do different things. And so if you start a podcast because you want A, B, C, and D, you'll probably design what looks like a standard podcast. It's going to be an interview where you have a conversation with someone every week, and you're going to be great. You're going to have amazing guests, really cool insights, great conversations. It's going to be really high value, but it's not designed to do the specific things that you actually decided that you wanted. So the first thing that it's important to do to fix that error of misalignment is figure out, what do I want? And then what elements of a podcast contribute to it, or what types of podcasts create that, and make your decisions accordingly. So as an example for that, I hear a lot of people when they first get on a call with me, they're like, I want to use a podcast to build my thought leadership. Okay, that's amazing. You can absolutely do that. But then they show the episodes that they've got in the can already, what they've prepared or what they've already been releasing. It's all conversations with guests where they are shining the spotlight on their guest and sharing their expertise and extracting out great wisdom from them, but they're not sharing a lot of their own thought leadership. And so they're creating great content, but they're not actually achieving the goal that they set out to do. And that's when podcasting can kind of really become a drag, because you're putting in all this effort. You're making something that's good, objectively good, but it's not doing what you actually needed it to do for it to be valuable for your personal business.
And I think that that's one of the things right off the bat I loved about the book, how you really go through and you say, like, here are the main types and aligned with the goals for podcasting for business. Because I know right away I could see and identify, because I feel like if you try to do a podcast without that idea of here are the different strategies and goals aligned, it's kind of like you're going to have all your favorite meals at once, right? You're going to try and
Yeah.
have like your steak dinner and your like breakfast pancakes. That's my son's favorite, right? And then like my daughter loves eggs Benedict. And you're just going to end up with something that isn't good at any of those things because it tries to do all of them.
Yeah, very much so. And I think there's also, podcasts can do a lot more than people assume. There's more in podcasting as a vehicle for doing different business tasks than it says on the tin. And I think really starting to explore, what is a podcast? How can you design it to do different things? It really is a tool that you can custom design to do different things in your business. And I think that's a really exciting idea, but it is also kind of an intimidating one, because as we've spoken before, we all already have businesses. You don't need a new one. And so that's what I was trying to accomplish with the book, was to give people a way to say, okay, actually, I'd like A, B, and C. Here's the formula for that kind of podcast, just to hopefully take a little of that exploratory labor out of the equation.
Right. And one of the other things I love about the book, and guys, I really did like really love this book. So, I was authentic. But when I first I got the ebook, right? And like opened it on my Kindle and I'm like, oh, it's not too big, right? It was like, again, thinking of your, the readers of this book, of like business owners, entrepreneurs, they need something that they can digest pretty quickly. And that was really nice. So I was like, this is something. So if you're a business owner who's listening and you're thinking about it, be like, again, I don't want to go to school again. I already have a business. The nice thing is the book is designed for someone like you to go through and understand. And then if you want more help doing it, to talk to Megan and she can help you with the implementation.
But yeah, and it's designed so you can kind of flip and choose. Just, you don't have to read the whole thing to get value out of it. You can just go to the specific points that are of interest. Because again, no one's got time for useless reading right now.
Right, exactly. So once somebody gets their strategy set, they're like, okay, I want to do thought leadership. What's the system for turning episodes into something that consistently build the business, either bringing in leads, building authority? Like, how do we really get it to add to the business?
Yeah, so a lot of that comes into the pre-planning that you're going to do. And I'm sorry, that is absolutely the least fun answer of all of the possible answers. But it really is. So for building thought leadership, the first thing is understanding, what do you really need and want to be known for? What is that area of expertise? What is that topic? What are the conversations happening out there in the world that you want to be contributing to? And so that means some research, either done by yourself or done by your fabulous executive virtual assistant, who I'm sure would be excellent at doing that kind of work. But getting a sense of the lay of the land, what are people saying? What's the type of conversation they're having? And what are you adding to the conversation that is new? And then designing your podcast episodes around that. A thought leadership podcast should usually include some solo content. You may have conversations with other experts, but those are conversations with an expert about an area of mutual expertise rather than an interview extracting knowledge. And you should also be getting your solo content in there so you have time and airspace to really put your ideas out there. You might comment on the news, you might review topics, you might teach, you might explain, you might do Q&A. Those are really, really fun Q&A episodes. But these are all chances for you to get your own knowledge and IP out there, with the idea that other people are going to turn to you as a source of information. And that's going to go into your promotion as well. So your episodes, they should be searchable on your website really easily, and they should be well optimized to be found when people are, typing into LLMs or when they're looking into search. That's a big part of Thought Leadership Podcast, is making your content findable. Again, not fun work, not the fun part of podcasting, but long term, that's going to be really, really valuable for you. So it really comes down to figuring out, what are the things that create thought leadership for anything? And then how is your podcast going to do those things, and kind of building the systems and the structure around for every episode, doing all of those steps that make it findable, that make it referable, and as much as possible, engaging with other people who are having the same kind of conversations so that when somebody looks at podcast B, they're like, okay, that's really interesting. Oh, good. Podcaster C, that's you, is also talking about this. I need to listen to them too to continue. So I have all of the information.
Right. Okay. I feel like there's like 5 million things I could go into just to this idea of thought leadership podcasting. But some of the things that it's bringing up for me is I know like we've put our podcast episodes on our website. The thing is, it hasn't been great for SEO because we don't do thought leadership style podcasts. I'm always interviewing a different guest. So like we're kind of talking about their business and there's nuances which are tangential to mine, but not necessarily directly related. So a thought leadership style podcast would be better if I wanted it for like SEO on my website.
Exactly.
The other thing I'm thinking about with thought leadership, some of the podcasts I'm thinking of that do it well are where there are two co-hosts. So they can have discussion and they can stay on their specific topic because they don't have someone else that they have to engage who has a different topic and a different expertise that they're bringing in.
Yeah, absolutely. Excellent point. And co-hosted podcasts are really popular for that type of thing. It's great if you have a co-founder, if you've got like a firm that has different partners in it. Those are really great opportunities to have that co-hosted show. And it's solos typically outperform almost anything else because people love the host that they listen to. But co-hosts come in just about second because people get to know both of you, and the listeners they like you, and you build these relationships with the host that you listen to. And I think co-host is a great way to do it because all of the airtime is shared, but it's still all focused on what you want to be building thought leadership for.
Well, and it's so funny and I'd love to dive into like what type of podcasting to do the best. And I remember once having a conversation with people. It was about a very popular podcast that we listened to that had two co-hosts. And people were having a very heated discussion about which of the co-hosts they preferred. It's like,
that is a risk you take.
It was really funny. I mean, it was like back when you were kids and you're arguing over like, who's your favorite Backstreet Boy or whatever the case may have been, you know? Like people were like,
Brian
I
forever.
really like him. Yes, I really like him. Like, I think that guy's too pompous. It was intense. It was intense. So, okay. Now that we've had that little tangent, I'm curious. I'm really intrigued. You said like solos tend to perform the best. Can we kind of dive into your wisdom with that?
Yeah. So that one that solos perform best, that is more anecdotal than anything else. I'll be transparent about that because I produce a lot of podcasts. What we tend to find is that when someone typically has an interview show, but maybe every once in a while, maybe a guest canceled, they're going to do a solo. That solo episode is going to outperform most of the interviews that they've ever done. I think for the most part, most people do interviews because one, it's amazing networking. And if that's your goal, you got to have guests. And it's easier to have a conversation with someone than it is to sit and talk for 20 minutes. That's hard. I mean, okay, it's easy for some people. You're allowed to hate those people. But I find it challenging myself. But the people who are listening, they're listening for the host more than they are for the guest. You know, they may like the way the host asks questions. They may learn something from the guest. But really, the reason somebody tunes in to multiple episodes week over week is because they like the guest, because they like the host. Forgive me. And that's the real relationship that's built on the host to audience level. So I think it is fascinating that the solo episodes, they also tend to do really well just downloads wise because that personality marketing. It's the personal branding, and it's usually more focused for learning. So one person just talking when they've planned a little what the content is going to be, that can be a really good way to teach something. And those tend to be episodes that people go back to and refer to and listen to again and again because they're sharing something that's going to be really, really usable. And some guest conversations can do this as well, but it's harder to make that a natural sounding conversation, that level of like teaching and instructional type thing. So for re-listenability, solos tend to do really well for that also.
Yeah. And I'm thinking for myself and the podcasts I listen to, which again, anecdotal, when I do, and the irony is these are not the podcasts that I produce, but I do find that like because I listen on Spotify, and I do find that sometimes when I find somebody that I'm like, they are an expert on something I want to learn about, I'm going through and I'm just listening to all of their solo casts, which, yeah. They get a lot of.
That's the expert that you want, right? Like that's who you want to listen to. And I think it's really interesting. And I feel like I'm forever encouraging people to do more solo episodes because they are so useful in so many areas of the business. And it's not to guests are amazing. I don't know if podcasts need them and thrive on them, but it's really, I think, more room for solos. You can kind of get over that block of, wow, that's a lot of pressure just on me as the solo speaker. You can get a lot of long-term business value out of them.
I love that. Very helpful.
If you're running a growing company and still handling too many operational details yourself, there's a better way forward. The Delegate or Die checklist shows you the exact tasks that drain leadership bandwidth and the simple changes that recover 15 to 30 plus hours a week. Download it free at workergenics.com/scale smart. Now let's get back to the episode.
Now, with all of the shows you've worked on, I know it's been a lot. How do you actually know if a podcast is moving the needle for a business? Like, what should a business owner be looking at? What metrics? How can they tell?
So that's going to come down to why you started the show. A show that's built for strategic networking is going to have different metrics that we track than one that was built for thought leadership or sales enablement or something like that. So let's say that, one of the goals is, you want to build more referral partnerships and have that be the way that you grow your business by getting those direct referrals. So you're going to track the different guests that you have. And first, you're going to optimize the show to make sure that you're actually asking for the referrals and that you're making that as easy as possible. There's a whole bunch that goes into it, but you're going to track how often people actually send you referrals. And then how many of those referrals convert into new business. And the people that have sent them, you can just keep track over time. In the last year, okay, John has sent me 2 really great leads. That was amazing. Eddie hasn't sent me any. Okay, that happens. That's no problem. But just keeping track of this is the outcome that we wanted. Here's how we know it's working. And a lot of it is going to be manual tracking. Thought leadership is one, it's a lot harder to measure because you don't necessarily know how much space you're taking up in somebody else's mind. But some heuristics that you can look for is where you're appearing in search results, kind of the SEO strategy, looking things where you're appearing on Apple and Spotify in terms of like when you search for your topic area, where do you come up in the rankings is another metric that you can track. You can also look for links and citations from other people that are sourcing your work. And you can try to cultivate those too. When if you're sharing, for example, some industry data that you've created, well, you can send that to every journalist who covers your topic area and track those backlinks that are generated as a way of measuring your thought leadership as you're building it. So that's kind of off the top of my head, a couple of examples of how we'd track less easy to track things.
Those are some great things to get people's minds turning and to see what's possible. I love that. Now, I know that you and I both know the biggest issue. I mean, I'm sure you probably know the stat of how many podcasts quit within like 5 or 10 episodes or something like that. And
But
so
it's I think it's like 7 out of 10 or something don't make it, or 50. A ridiculous number don't make it to episode 10.
Right. And so the biggest issue people have with podcasts is they start it and it's the execution, right? They just don't have I love systems. So, and I remember even as a systems lover, how difficult it was to set up a system for a podcast because I like when things are like super smooth. And so it was like, okay, how do I get my video editor? How do I get my executive assistant in here? How do I do it? So all I have to do is show up for the episode because other than that, if anything else depends on me, I'm not going to make it to 10 episodes.
Yeah.
Like, let's be honest. That is my reality. So let's talk about execution and where people get stuck. What wisdom do you have there?
Yeah. So I think it very much comes back to something we talked about at the beginning. Podcasting can be expensive because to make it work in a way that's going to be feasible with all of the other work that you have to do as a business owner, one way or another, you're going to pay for it. You're going to either pay for it with your own time to actually do it, with team time to manage it, or you're going to hire a company like mine to do it for you. And the way to minimize and mitigate those costs and keep the execution sustainable is be really clear about what you want to do. If you know that the main goal for your podcast is relationship building, cool. You're going to invest your time and your energy and your budget on the things that build the relationship. That's going to be your booking workflow. It's going to be the assets that you send to guests to show them that you were thinking about them. But maybe you're not going to spend much time and effort with how they're presented on your website because that's not going to impact the relationship building in the same way that, say, your follow-up with the guest will when you send them the reels where they said something brilliant. So figure out what you actually need and ruthlessly cut out anything that doesn't actually help you achieve that goal. You can always add more stuff later. But if you want to keep your podcast lean, what's the most important thing that it's going to do? And what are the things that directly impact its ability to do that? And so I'd say, really focus on what you actually want out of it because you can spend as much time as you want optimizing different areas of your podcast to do different things. I mean, I spend a possibly stupid amount of time with the SEO and the presentation on my website of my episodes. I mean, you know what? It has turned off. Our rankings have improved and now we get a lot more visits and discovery calls because of that work. It was a long time coming. That's how it goes. It compounds. So depending on where you are in your business, you may or may not want to invest that much time in like the really long-term strategy. Guests are always going to be a shorter term strategy in terms of ROI than like long-term content building. So figure out what's important and just disregard all the advice about best practices, ruthlessly cut out anything that does not help you achieve your next goal with your podcast.
I love that. And that's the challenge is that with businesses, we're like, oh, this is a good idea. And we add it on, but we don't like monitor. We don't have any KPIs associated with it. And then we just keep it. And we end up with these Frankenstein businesses where only a fraction of what we're doing actually is working toward our goal. And so it's like, set this thing up and like really optimize it for that one goal. I think that's really helpful. And that can be empowering to business owners because it's like you don't have to do all the things. You figure out your one goal for your podcast and you optimize for that and you do not stress about everything else.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, it's so simple to hear it said and you go, oh yeah, that's exactly right. But then you do start doing it and you're like, oh, but I could optimize it and really improve our web traffic. And you could. The question is, should you right now? Because all of these, because they're all legitimate strategies. And the difficulty, and it really is a difficulty, is restraining yourself to what's most important. But that's, I think, going to be one of the things that is the most likely to lead to success and keeping it going, because it's super easy to get burned out. Just the amount of content you have to deal with. Like when you're doing a weekly show, that's so much content, you know, so it's really being careful about how you're spending that time.
Which leads me into our next question. So one of the things people love about a podcast is that you can take one interview and turn it into multiple pieces of content, right? It is the engine for my social media, right? Like most of that comes from the podcast. What would you recommend? Because people see that done, you know, and they're like, what's the best way to turn that one podcast into multiple content pieces? Is it like these AI tools we hear about? What is it to easily get that accomplished?
Yeah, so that's an interesting one. I'm not the biggest fan of AI tools. And partially is that because, you know, we have people who are highly skilled at doing this work to a high level, and AI is not great at dealing with multiple shows that all have different voices and goals at the same time.
I agree. And it's nice to hear you say that. And it's just like, I see the junk that some people get from just putting into one of these AI tools. And it's like, that's not, yes, it's content, but I don't think it's getting you anything.
Yeah, and it is a lot of junk, and I think it's a lot of reason why people are like, oh my gosh, I can get 10 clips and we can put them and that'll fill social for the week, and that's amazing. But that's not resulting in much at all. So short clips repurposed from podcast episodes, they can be really good, they can be interesting, but they have to be very carefully chosen. And you really, as the host and as a guest, you kind of have to be in the habit of talking in narrative arcs. Because without enough context to make something completely understandable as a statement in and of itself, most people aren't going to be interested enough in order to go and listen to a full episode. So you kind of need to be talking in sound bites if you want that strategy to be effective. The easiest way to do that is to plan a little bit in advance what you want your social post to be. There's nothing wrong with asking your guests to stick around for 2 minutes after the episode to be like, hey, I'm Megan Dougherty and I'm on the Workogenics podcast to talk about how awesome podcasting can be for your business. And that can be a clip that's going to be really easy to slice out. And you can do that and you can have your guests do that. Or you can just for yourself plan maybe part of your intro or outro, just something that is going to be really easily clipped with a little bit of intention that's going to create that curiosity gap. So somebody wants to go on. So that's on the video AV end, how that's going to be. And then on the other end, if you've got a script or written notes for your podcast, text is easier to repurpose than video is. Because script you can modify. You can make it read better for LinkedIn. You can make it more of a blog post. And so I think really focusing on if that SEO, if the social media, if the content is your big goal for podcasting, invest in the high quality video so it looks good. Invest in the planning of the video so that you can get those clips that are going to be easy and effective, and get it transcribed and edited so that you've got really good text to work from now and into the future.
You know, everything you said, I've experienced personally. So again, listeners, like, yes, a million times. And one of the funniest like examples of this is we have this post that I tried because one of my friends of the podcast does it on socials. We extract a quote from our guest that we put as a like quote on our socials, like in words, like, you know, like I'm super smart at podcasting, Megan Dougherty podcast. And it's the silliest, like it's the silliest social media post, right? It's just their quote. It doesn't perform as well as our reels from podcasts, but it's the second best. And it's just, it's like, it takes very little time. It is a Canva, whatever they call it, like a Canva template. We have it in different colors so that it's not the same week after week, right? It's on like an 8-week rotation maybe of the colors. And it does so well, but people really engage with this silly little quote. It's really funny.
Love that. Yeah, I noticed something similar, and this is with guest assets that we were sharing. So, you know, this is one of the big complaints is, oh my gosh, I have a guest on, they don't share the episode. Why don't they share the episode? Why don't they share the episode? So we started guests never have to. They've got their own promotional calendars. They've got their own priorities, and maybe they've talked about this topic 18 times in the last month. There's lots of good reasons for a guest not to share. But we did find guests are much more likely to share if we created reels and clips and assets where they're actually teaching something that's going to be of interest to their audience rather than me to ours. So it's really thinking about what is this person's audience, what's going to be compelling for them to share. They may not want to sound self-promotional and be like, I was on this podcast, it was great, but they may want to actually teach something that's going to be useful for their audience as well. So kind of figuring out what would be the guest motivation to share. and creating an asset that's going to help them do that. That made a difference for us as well in terms of what we were putting out there.
That's really helpful. I love that. And that's what I love about speaking to someone like you, Megan, who is an expert on something versus there are times I love AI tools, right? Claude is kind of my BFF. And yet Claude is not going to know this stuff that I'm getting out of your brain today. And so I love this opportunity to really speak with somebody who has their own wisdom and experience on something, because it's definitely a much higher level of learning that I and our listeners get. So a little bit of a tangent.
Until
Just
the
wanna
AI
thank
take
you.
over, let's enjoy it as long as we can.
Yes. Now, one of the things I know I see a lot with our virtual assistant business, and I'm sure you see it when clients work with you as well, is a lot of business owners and entrepreneurs struggle with letting go in general, right? With letting someone else do any piece of it. What is your wisdom there for a business owner who's like, I want to do a podcast, and yet I am having issues trusting another company or a team or anybody like that to do all the pieces to execute my vision?
First thing I would do is be a guest on a bunch of other podcasts, whole lot of other podcasts, see how they handle the situation, the assets, the follow-up, the delivery of episodes. And you will see if you go on enough of them, most of them kind of half-ass those elements pretty hard.
Yes.
Sometimes for good reasons, sometimes for bad. It happens to the best of us, but it's really quick to learn when you're a guest really, really frequently. It's easy to not be the worst one. It's very easy to not be the worst one. So that's my advice is, see what it can be like, see what you want, see what you prioritize. What do people send you that you actually care about? And then really build the systems and build the standards and build, the understanding with your vendors or whoever you're working with. This is the stuff I really care about. This is the stuff I don't. And then just as much as possible, try to relax. You're going to hate your first episode anyway. Like there's no escaping that. You just have to kind of embrace the fact your first couple are going to kind of suck. That's the only way out is through. So I think it is hard to let go, but podcasting is a long game strategy, much more than it is a short term one. So if you sweat the small stuff right now, that's maybe something you should address with a business coach, because it's probably affecting other areas of your business as well.
Well said. And I think that long-term perspective is really helpful. I know that some people say, like, close your eyes, do 100 episodes or do a year's worth of podcasts, because it's going to take that long to start to see an ROI or some return on your podcast. It is a long-term game. How long-term is it? Like, you're the data expert. You're super quantitative. Yeah. How long does it typically take to start to see results?
That, I'm going to say, it depends a little bit on what you're trying to achieve out of it. If you're building a long-term content and SEO strategy and you're trying to really kind of build your thought leadership over time, that's going to be a project of years. You're going to be at that for a long time before you really see meaningful, measurable results. But if you're trying to strategically network and build relationships with referral partners, you can start to see whether or not it's working, or at least have enough data to be able to refine within 2 to 3 months of podcasting. And then there's even other types of podcasting you can do that are by design short-term. So this is a great way to start too. If you're feeling a little nervous, or if you're worried you're going to be too involved in the process, start with the 12 episode season, and make that your sales enablement season, where you're going to use that to nurture people as they come into your environment. And that's going to be one of the first pieces of content where they get to know and like you. That's going to let you get your feet wet. And it's going to be an asset that, yes, you're going to work really hard for about 3 months on it, but then it's going to be done. And it's going to keep working for you for the long term. So I think it varies a lot on what you're trying to achieve.
And I love that suggestion too, because I feel like so many people, when they think about a podcast, they think about, I'm committing to do this every week for at least a year, right? 52 episodes, right? And to think of like, hey, I can test this out and do something 12 times and then decide and have something that stands on its own, and then decide what I want to do from there.
Yeah, you can always add more podcasts. Like you can always add more, but I think starting with the season is really good for a beginner, because you know what? You might hate it. Not everyone likes podcasting. The people who there's survivorship bias. The people who podcast for a long time, they enjoy at least some elements of it typically, but not everyone does. And if it's not for you, then, at the end of a season, you didn't pod fade, you didn't quit, you wrapped up a project that is now complete. And that's a really different energy than failing or giving up at something.
Love this. All right. Now, as we wrap up, because you've given us so much wisdom, time has flown. Megan, where should people go to connect with you and learn more about what you do? Or I think you have a resource for people.
I do. So if you want to connect with me or learn about how we help people podcast, you'll want to go to onestonecreative.net. That's onestonecreative.net. And if you would like a free ebook copy of the book that Adrienne, you so kindly praised and talked up, you can get a free one at podcastingforbusiness.com.
Thank you so much for sharing. And listeners, please reach out to Megan if you're looking for someone to help you execute a podcast that will actually help you reach your business goals.